Welcome back to Eyes on Israel. If you're watching this show on the day that it is airing on Real America's Voice, then today is the festival of Purim. So happy Purim. This is a Jewish holiday, a festival that has its source at the end of the Book of Esther. As the Book of Esther itself states, towards the end of the book, in commemoration of the great victory and the celebration that occurred after that victory, at the end of the Book of Esther, the Jewish people were victorious over their genocidal enemies who were attempting to wipe them out in Persia. And in commemoration of this great victory, we have a new festival called Purim. And the practices of the day include the reading of the Book of Esther in its entirety in the synagogue twice, once in the evening at the beginning of the festival, that would have been last night, and once in the morning. In addition to that, as the Book of Esther mandates, gifts are given to the poor, so everyone in the community gathers together money in advance of Purim and on Purim itself to give it out, large quantities of money given out to poor people that day, as well as giving gifts of food items to each other. It's a day of a lot of joy, a lot of celebration. The strangest thing about the Book of Esther, and this is what I'd like to explore right now, is the fact that the Book of Esther, although it is a book in the Bible, does not mention God even once. Not once. Read through the whole book. It doesn't even refer to God obliquely in some way. It doesn't even really hint at God. There's no mention of God in the Book of Esther. And this, in fact, led some in the Christian tradition to not want to include the Book of Esther in the Bible. And in fact, there are traditions within Christianity that don't include it. Even within the Jewish tradition, at the time of the canonization, at the choice of which books were going to be included in the Bible, the Talmud tells us that there was a debate about whether or not to include the Book of Esther. So why would there be a book in the Bible that does not even mention God once? To answer that question, I'd like to ask another question. At the end of the Book of Esther, in that section where it tells us that there is going to be established a new festival to commemorate this great victory, we read as follows, and I'm picking this up in Esther chapter 9, verse 20. Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent dispatches to all the Jews throughout the provinces of King Ahasuerus, near and far, charging them to observe the 14th and 15th days of Adar every year, the same days on which the Jews enjoyed relief from their enemies, and the same month which had been transformed for them from one of grief and mourning to one of festive joy. They were to observe them as days of feasting and merrymaking, and as an occasion for sending gifts to one another and presents to the poor. The Jews accordingly assumed as an obligation that which they had begun to practice and which Mordecai prescribed for them. For Haman, the son of Hamdata, the Agagite, the foe of all Jews, had plotted to destroy the Jews and had cast a pur, that is, a lot, with intent to crush and exterminate them. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded, with the promulgation of his decree, let the evil plot which he devised against the Jews recoil on his own head. So Haman and his sons were hung on the tree, meaning they were hung. For that reason, these days were named Purim, after the poor. Now let me explain what we just read. This tells the story about how there was this plot against the Jews, led by Haman, this chief advisor to the king Ahasuerus, who wanted to wipe out all the Jews. The plot was foiled, and the Jews won. Haman and his sons, who were his advisors, his party, as it were done away with. And then the text tells us that these days, these festive days for eternity, are to be called Purim, the plural of the word pur, this word that appears in the Book of Esther, which is a lot, the casting of a lot. This is very strange. Of all the plot points in the Book of Esther, why do we care about the casting of a lot? Let's first recount the plot. Towards the beginning of the Book of Esther, Haman, who hates the Jews, gets elevated to be a senior advisor to King Ahasuerus. He decides that he wants to commit genocide against the Jews. So the first thing he does is he chooses a day for this genocide. And we read in chapter 3, in the first month, that is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus's reign, a pur, which means a lot, was cast before Haman concerning every day and every month until it fell upon the 12th month, that is the month of Adar. In other words, Haman chose the date for the genocide by casting lots, kind of a little raffle. And now at the end of the book, after the victory, we're told that the name of the holiday commemorating the victory is going to be Purim, to remind us of the fact that Haman chose the date by casting lots. Now, this is very strange. Think about it for a moment. Who really cares how Haman chose the date for Purim? Let's say he had chosen the date of, I don't know, his anniversary or his wife's birthday or his own birthday or the king's birthday. What difference does it make that the way that Haman chose the date to wipe out all the Jews was by casting lots? Why was that significant enough that after the victory, Mordecai and Esther, the leaders of the Jewish people at the time, decided that this new festival, this new annual day to commemorate the victory, would be named after the lots? But folks, this is exactly the point of the whole festival. You see, Haman believed in chance. Lots, lotteries, raffles, seem to be complete chance. Haman was an Agagite, as we spoke about last week, a descendant of Amalek. He doesn't believe that God really runs the world or that there's any special providential relationship between the Jewish people and the God of Israel. So Haman worshiped chance. He believed that everything in life is random. There is no real plan. There's certainly no God who's in charge. So he casted lots because to him, chance is all there is. And then what happened in this story? Although God is not mentioned in the Book of Esther, the story progresses through a series of what looks like coincidences. Esther appointed queen after a strange turn of events, before Haman was even elevated to be the second in command to the king. For some reason that is not explained at all in the book, she concealed her Jewish identity. On the very day that Haman went to King Ahasuerus to ask him to hang Mordecai, that was the day, at that very moment, the king was reading in a book about favors that Mordecai had done for him. At that very moment, favors that had been done many years earlier. And on it goes. The book of Esther is filled with what appears to be coincidences. Coincidences that all just happen to work out, so much so that the original plot of genocide against the Jews gets completely turned on its head, and the Jews instead are victorious over their enemies. And that is the entire point of the festival of Purim. Mordecai and Esther, the leaders of the Jewish people at the time, named the festival Purim to poke fun at people like Haman, to ridicule them. They called the festival lots, chance, because we, people of faith, know that there's no such thing as chance. What looks like chance and what looks like coincidence is really God in control. But here's the thing. It's not like the splitting of the Red Sea or 10 plagues on the Egyptians, miracles that are overt for all to see. When God acts behind the scenes, it looks like just fortunate coincidences, good fortune, chance working in our favor. The festival of Purim was so named to highlight the fact that God's redemption of his people doesn't always include overt miracles. It often includes, and I would say more often includes, God acting behind the scenes in a way that we don't necessarily see him. His name is not in the book, but it's all God anyway. That's why the festival is called Purim, to remind us that there are those who believe in chance and there are those who know that God is really in charge. And that's why the name of God does not appear in the book of Esther. The name of God doesn't appear because that's the whole lesson of Esther. We live in a time today where we don't have miracles like the splitting of the sea or the 10 plagues or other kind of overt miracles that we see in the Bible. And that leads a lot of people to think that God is not really with us, that maybe we're just fallen into the hands of nature. But the book of Esther and the festival of Purim are here to remind us that at those times in history, where all you have is the coincidences, as it were, the events that take place in the headlines that might seem to a casual observer to be unrelated or just coincidental, it's really God working behind the scenes. So enjoy your Purim, remember to celebrate, and remember that no matter what things look like on the outside, God is always in charge. For more inspirational teachings, biblical teachings, if you enjoyed this, make sure to check out my book, Verses for Zion. This is my most recent book of biblical teachings. I'm sure you'll enjoy it, and you can get a copy of it at www.getvfz.com. You can't find it on Amazon. It's a great way to support the show. And you'll find inspirational teachings there for every day of the year, all about the God of Israel, the people of Israel, and the land of Israel. Thank you so much for watching Eyes on Israel. Please tell everyone about it. And please make sure to follow us on social media. And you can catch us here every week on Real America's Voice.